Hi everyone, I'm Sarah and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you my July TBR. First I want to just kind of mention that I was absent for about a month. So with everything that had been going on in the world, I was putting a lot of time and energy into supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, doing everything that I could to help promote that and to be not just an ally but an accomplice. And one of the things I decided I wanted to do was to take a step back from posting on BookTube. I know that I am a small channel, I don't have many subscribers, but it was just another small thing that I could do to make sure that I wasn't taking room for other people. I didn't feel like I needed to make a video addressing it because it's not really my voice or my feelings that needed to be heard. You should be listening to the Black BookTubers and Black activists and just the Black community in general. I will link some of those videos down below from some of the Black BookTubers I've followed, some of the ones I've just discovered. So that's why I took last month off. It was a personal decision that I made that felt comfortable and right for me and what I want to do and what I stand for and what I believe in. And I do want to say that it is still important that we're talking about these issues, that we don't forget about it, that we don't just try to go back to normal, because that's not okay. Just make sure that you're trying to do your part for the countries and societies that we all live in. If I could give one piece of advice for whatever it's worth coming from me, is to not look at this as a moment in time. Look at it like it's a commitment that you've made. Like, look at this like a lifelong commitment. You are making this conscious decision to continue to support the Black Lives Matter movement, and don't let this be oh well, I did my part during the month of June, so now I feel like I'm done. It's something that you have to continue to commit to every day. So with that, awkward transition to my TBR for July. So I will have a separate TBR video for the reading rush once I figure out what books I want to read for that, and whether or not I realistically think I can read 7 books, or if I should try to double up, kind of figure out what I want to do for that. So that will come in a couple of weeks. I'm also going to be participating in Becca and the Books Bookopoly 48-hour readathon, which happens in the second weekend in July, which I am super excited about. So that will not have a TBR video because you can't really plan that one, but I will have a reading vlog to go along with that one. For information on both of those readathons, I will link the announcement videos below. May and June were kind of not great reading months for me. I think altogether I read like 8 books, which is nothing to scoff at. That's still pretty good, but I just have been in a bit of a funk. I think it's just with my increased work schedule, I just haven't had the energy to read anything that's too chunky, too in-depth, too focused on, like, too world building-y, so that kind of leaves out a lot of the fantasy books that I have wanted to read. But I have come up with a TBR that I feel like could potentially be really good. So I've been trying to read through Brandon Sanderson's works. He is a fantasy author that has been on my radar for many, many years. I just have never really picked up his works. And so I think I might try to read the Mistborn Trilogy first, and the first book in the Mistborn Trilogy is actually called The Final Empire, but it is also called Mistborn, and the premise sounds really good. So the basic premise is that the whole entire trilogy is set in a world where, like, the bad guys won originally. A hero tried to save their world from, evil forces, and the hero failed, and now it's kind of the aftermath and people rising up again, and trying to rise up again, and kind of the world that they live in is an after effect, which I find really fascinating. I like when people do new things, play with tropes, I really enjoy writers who take chances and write different things, and while they use the tropes of their genre, specifically like fantasy, and while they use the tropes that are obviously understood and expected in their fantasy, they do try to work around them and kind of bring something new to the table. So I am excited to give this one a shot. The next book is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Now, I've been trying to get on track with the Elderling along pretty much since it was announced, and I just have not been. I tried to read this book back in May, and I read one chapter, and I only got through one chapter because I just wasn't feeling it. So I decided I'm going to put it back on my TBR for July and hopefully try to give it another shot. If it's still something I'm really not gravitating towards, then I'm just going to put it aside and not worry about it. It is something that I am interested in, like in theory, but I've just not really been able to pay attention to it long enough to actually see if it's something I want to continue reading. So putting this back on my list for July. So then the next book that I would like to read is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. I read The Poppy War in May and absolutely loved it. It was one of my favorite books I've ever read and one of the best books I've read this year. And so I am excited to pick up the sequel, The Dragon Republic. The general idea of The Poppy War and this series is that it's kind of like a military fantasy series, and it follows Rin and some of her classmates as they start at a military school, and then they are all called to war. They've learned the theory of war and battle and military strategy, but it's very different actually putting it into practice. And it's really interesting to see how that plays out. I like that R.F. Kuang does not really hold any punches when it comes to the brutality and gruesomeness of war, which I find in some fantasy series it is kind of glossed over, that this is actual war and people are literally dying, because as long as your favorites are fine, it's no big deal. And R.F. Kuang does not do that. She is absolutely very aware of what she's writing about and what she is talking about, and so I am excited to see where the story continues. I really loved Rin, so I am super excited to read the sequel, and the final one comes out later this year, so I am just really excited to actually continue on in this series, so I added this to my TBR for July as well. So I have a couple of books on hold and or checked out already from my library on my app, and so I thought I would kind of read some of those that may or may not pop up. One of them is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemison, but I put that book on hold, and that actually, I did get that one checked out, so I might put that one at the top of my list because that does have to go back in like 12 days. But that is the book that's kind of the, if I'm remembering correctly, it's the sci-fi fantasy-esque story of the earth kind of rises up and creates like a new environment where these people have to adapt and change in order to survive it. Which has always sounded really interesting, and I'm excited that I finally did get it. I've had it on hold at my library for like a really long time. Okay, and then that's right. So I've had The Deep by Rivers Solomon for a very long time, but I've heard such good things about the audiobook that I've been waiting months at this point to get the audiobook from my library so I can kind of listen to the audiobook as I read this book, kind of read along with it. I have a hard time listening to audiobooks and processing the story that's happening, so I thought kind of reading along while listening to it would be a really good, fun experience for me to experience and explore this book. I do not know if that one will get to me in this month or not, so we'll see. I also have An Unkindness of Ghosts, also by Rivers Solomon, that's on hold, which I heard about from Jessie from Bowties and Books. They put together a Black queer rec list for the Blackathon, the queer Blackathon that happened on Juneteenth, and I ended up putting a couple of those books on hold at the library because they sounded amazing, and even though I didn't have the time to read them, I want to read them in the future. So thankfully they mentioned The Unkindness of Ghosts, which I don't quite remember exactly what it is, but it is something to do with space or sci-fi-esque. They live on a space station, I think, something like that. I remember it sounded really good, and so I'm hoping to get that one soon. It says approximately 2 to 4 weeks, so I mean, we'll see. And then the final book I have on hold currently is The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Juan de Petrus. It's about these two black girls who have different upbringings and lives, and they meet. I think one of them's a transfer student, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and they meet and they sort of fall in love as they navigate their lives together and apart. I've heard fantastic things about this book. It has been on my hold shelf since, I want to say, I guess I can tell you when I put it on my hold shelf. At the beginning of May. So it's been on my hold shelf since the beginning of May, and hopefully in the next couple weeks I'll finally get that one. So those are some of the books that I may or may not read this month. I'm excited about a lot of the books that I do have and I might read, so that's great. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my videos now that I'm actually going to be posting again. Make sure you continue to support the Black Lives Matter movement and raising your voices when you can, and also making sure that we are all listening and supporting in every aspect of our lives. And I hope that you guys have a fantastic day. Wish me luck on this reading, guys.